it was in. I just get frustrated when people talk about the GOATs of the game and his name is not mentioned.
Yeah.
That's all, just mention all that. So it's just like they just surpassed him up and went from Mike to LeBron and they left him out.
Cowardly, to be honest, like, because they didn't speak about him like this when he was here. Yeah, I think it's like...
Shaquille O'Neal has decided he's heard enough. For years, he's watched the greatest of all time conversation play out in a way that never sat right with him. A debate that somehow jumps directly from Michael Jordan to LeBron James, like nobody existed in between. Like an entire era of dominance just gets skipped over without a second thought. To Shaq, that's not just a sports argument, that's personal. And now Paul Pierce has said something that pushed things well past the line. Years after Kobe Bryant's tragic death in a helicopter crash in January 2020, Pierce went on a podcast and made his position clear. Kobe was never truly the face of the NBA. That statement landed like a grenade. The internet reacted immediately, and the debate exploded across every platform. But there was one person guaranteed to hear those words differently from everyone else. Shaquille O'Neal, the man who shared a locker room with Kobe Bryant for 8 seasons, who stood beside him under Phil Jackson and won 3 consecutive championships, and who later stood at Kobe's memorial and called him Heaven's MVP. Shaq didn't just hear what Paul Pierce said, he felt it. And the response that came from Shaq was anything but calm.
I just get frustrated when people talk about the GOATs of the game and his name is not mentioned.
Yeah.
That's all, just mention all that. So it's just like they just surpassed him up and went from Mike to LeBron and they left him out.
The word frustrated. That was the exact word Shaq used. And honestly, that should concern Paul Pierce, because when Shaquille O'Neal gets serious about defending Kobe Bryant's name, the energy in the room changes entirely. People stop treating it like a casual sports debate. Before this story is over, you're going to hear Shaq shut down the argument Pierce started. You're going to hear reports of Jason Tatum confronting Pierce directly, face to face. And you're going to hear from the one man who witnessed every single game Kobe Bryant ever played. And what he reveals about what Kobe said on the night his Achilles tore apart will stop you cold. Because even in one of the most painful moments of his entire career, Kobe's mind went straight to Paul Pierce. Shaquille O'Neal is not just another retired player with a hot take. This is a 4-time NBA champion. 3 of those titles were won standing next to Kobe Bryant. 8 years of shared practices, playoff battles, championship pressure, and everything that comes with being under the most intense spotlight in professional sports. Shaq saw Kobe at his sharpest, at his most competitive, and at his most relentless. 15 All-Star selections, a league MVP, 3 Finals MVP awards, and a level of two-way dominance that the sport rarely produces. They pushed each other, challenged each other, and clashed behind closed doors more than once. But through it all, one thing between them never wavered. Shaq's respect for what Kobe was as a basketball player never had a ceiling. When Kobe Bryant passed away on January 26, 2020, Shaq stood before the world at the Staples Center Memorial and called him Heaven's MVP. That wasn't grief talking in the moment. That was a man who had seen Kobe up close for nearly a decade, telling the world exactly what he knew to be true. So when Shaquille O'Neal speaks on Kobe's legacy, it doesn't register as opinion. It registers as testimony from someone who lived it. But Shaq isn't the only voice in this conversation who carries that kind of weight. There's another man connected to this story whose relationship with Kobe runs even deeper than most people realize. Gary Vitti spent 32 years as the head athletic trainer for the Los Angeles Lakers. 32 years! He was present through eras that spanned from Magic Johnson all the way through Kobe Bryant. Championships, devastating injuries, private locker room moments, and grueling playoff runs. He saw everything, and he saw it from inches away. In fact, Gary Vitti is widely believed to be the only person on the planet who watched every single game Kobe Bryant ever played at the professional level. Every one. So when Vitti speaks about Kobe, it carries a different kind of authority. And what he has to say about the darkest night of Kobe's career is something that reframes this entire conversation. Because here's the part that most people don't want to sit with. Kobe Bryant didn't simply exist during his era, he defined it. From the 2008 Olympics, where he helped lead the Redeem team back to gold for the United States, to capturing his 5th championship in 2010 alongside Pau Gasol, Kobe became the central figure of basketball culture on a global scale. His jersey sold everywhere. The Mamba Mentality transcended sports and became a philosophy that athletes across every discipline adopted as their own. And the players who actually lined up against him night after night know exactly what he brought to the floor. The ones who lost to him know it even better. But Paul Pierce's comments had people acting like none of that ever happened. Fast forward to April 12, 2013, Lakers versus Warriors at Staples Center. Kobe drives baseline against Harrison Barnes, and then everything stops. His Achilles tendon snaps. He was 34 years old, still carrying that Lakers team on his back, still willing his body through whatever it took. And in that single moment, the trajectory of his career changed forever. Most players break down right there on the floor. Most don't even attempt to stand. Kobe did something different. Gary Vitti described the moment like the memory never aged. Kobe refused to go down. Standing on one leg with a completely torn Achilles, he walked himself to the free throw line and calmly converted both shots. The crowd fell into a stunned silence. Players on both benches looked at each other, not knowing what to say. But what happened next left even Vitti shaken. As he helped Kobe make his way towards the locker room, Kobe started talking, and what he said revealed exactly where his mind was in that moment. Vitti offered to get him a chair. Kobe looked down at him and said, "Forget Paul Pierce." He was referencing Game 1 of the 2008 NBA Finals, Celtics versus Lakers. Paul Pierce went down mid-game, grabbing his knee with trainers rushing over and a wheelchair being brought onto the court. The entire arena assumed he was done for the series. Then, less than 2 minutes later, Pierce came sprinting back onto the floor, hit back-to-back three-pointers in the span of 22 seconds, and helped Boston seize control of the game. Kobe never forgot it. And in the most physically devastating moment of his entire career, with a torn Achilles and his season ending in real time, that memory was what was driving him. He wasn't thinking about the pain. He was sending a message to himself and to Pierce that he would not be carried off. Think about what that reveals about the mentality. That is not a normal competitor. That is something else entirely. Boston won that game, and the moment became part of playoff folklore, but Kobe filed it away and never let it go. The Celtics took that series, and Kobe carried that loss with him quietly for years. So when his own Achilles gave out on that court in 2013, there was no wheelchair, no being carried off, no visible surrender. He willed himself upright and walked off that floor on his own terms. Not for the crowd, not for the cameras. In his mind, he was sending a direct message to Paul Pierce, a man who wasn't even in the building that night. That is the mentality Paul Pierce just casually brushed aside on a podcast. And here's what makes it even harder to accept. Pierce didn't just observe Kobe from a distance, he competed against him. He stood across from him on the biggest stage the sport offers. In Game 7 of the 2010 NBA Finals, Kobe walked away with his 5th championship ring alongside Pau Gasol, while the Lakers celebrated in front of the world. Pierce walked away with nothing. He lived through that era firsthand and felt what Kobe was capable of at his peak. But now, 15 years later, with Kobe gone and unable to respond for himself, Pierce sits down on a podcast and suggests the Mamba legacy was somehow overstated. The internet reacted immediately, but one response stood out above everything else. Jason Tatum had something to say.
The current face of the Boston Celtics, a player who grew up idolizing Kobe Bryant and has never been shy about it, called the whole thing cowardly. His point was sharp and direct. People didn't talk about Kobe like this when he was alive. Nobody was stepping forward to minimize his legacy while he was still here to answer it. Now that he's gone, suddenly people want to highlight the inefficiencies, question the shot selection, and quietly attempt to rewrite what actually happened during that era. Think about how significant that moment is. A modern Celtics star publicly calling out one of the most celebrated figures in Boston basketball history over Kobe Bryant. That tells you everything about how deeply this debate runs. Because to a lot of people watching this, it stopped being a sports argument a long time ago. This feels like an attempt to erase something that actually happened. And history doesn't bend that easily. Not while Shaquille O'Neal is still standing here with first-hand knowledge of what Kobe was. Not while former players keep coming forward with stories about what it felt like to try and stop him on a nightly basis. Shaq's perspective on Kobe isn't filtered through a rivalry or a podcast take. It comes from 8 seasons in the same locker room, 4 championships, 3 of them won together under Phil Jackson. Years of shared pressure, shared battles, shared expectations, and a relationship complicated enough to make the greatness they produced together even more remarkable. Pierce only ever saw Kobe from the opposing side, trying to slow him down. Shaq knew what Kobe looked like before the game even started. And the stories Shaq tells still sound unreal. One stands above the rest. Kobe's final NBA game. 20 years in the league, a body held together through sheer will, the Achilles injury still in the background of everything. Most legends at that stage accept a graceful exit. Kobe did something different. Before the game, Shaq went on live television and essentially called his shot. He told Kobe to go out there and drop 50 points. Kobe scored 60. In the final game of his career, 60 points. That is the kind of ending that exists in movies, not in real life. Almost no one actually delivers it when the moment arrives. And that's precisely why players speak about Kobe in a way they don't speak about almost anyone else. The word that keeps coming up from teammates and opponents alike is assassin. It didn't matter who you were, how big you were, or what your reputation said about you. If you stepped on the court against Kobe Bryant, he was coming for you. And by the time the final buzzer sounded, most nights you didn't even fully realize the damage had already been done. That is the legacy Paul Pierce just tried to minimize, and the people who are actually there aren't going to let it stand quietly. The people who actually had to guard Kobe don't talk about him casually. They describe the experience like a recurring nightmare. Former opponents reach for words like assassin almost instinctively. Others draw direct comparisons to Michael Jordan because of how calculated and relentless he was from the opening tip to the final buzzer. And yet here is Paul Pierce, years removed from the court, sitting comfortably in a studio, trying to chip away at everything Kobe built. That's exactly why the reaction came so fast and so hard. And here's a layer of this story that often gets overlooked. Kobe didn't just work harder than everyone else. He studied the greats with an obsession that bordered on scientific. Former legends have come forward and described how Kobe would pull them aside after going at each other and quietly ask them to teach him their moves. He would stay after practice, absorb their footwork, their angles, their habits, and then go away and refine everything until it was sharper than the original. Some of those same legends later admitted that Kobe eventually used their same signature moves better than they ever did. That is not the biography of a player who wasn't the face of the league. That is the story of someone who built himself into a global icon through an obsession with excellence that simply never turned off. From 2000 through 2002, the Lakers ran the NBA. 3 consecutive championships under Phil Jackson, including one of the most dominant playoff runs in league history, going 15-1 in 2001. The team looked genuinely unstoppable during that stretch, and while Kobe and Shaq were constructing one of the greatest dynasties the sport has ever seen, Pierce was watching those finals from Boston. Shaq said he felt frustrated hearing Pierce's comments, but that was only the surface of what he was holding back, because once he sat down on the Straight Game podcast, the restraint was gone.
His message was clear and simple. He doesn't care who you put at the top of the list. Michael, LeBron, Kobe, pick whoever you want. Just make sure all the names are in the conversation. Stop skipping from Jordan straight to LeBron like the 2 decades in between didn't happen. Put all the names on the board and let people decide for themselves. Then Shaq went further. He called Kobe a carbon copy of Michael Jordan, and he didn't say it casually. He said it as someone who watched Kobe every single day for 8 years, from the moment he entered the league as a teenager straight out of high school to the point where he became one of the most feared players the sport has ever produced. In Shaq's eyes, Kobe didn't just follow in Jordan's footsteps, he completed what Jordan started. His exact question was this: if Michael is the standard, how is Kobe not right there beside him? He called it the greatest question in basketball. And coming from someone who stood next to both legacies up close, it's very hard to argue with. But there is one thing Pierce will never fully understand: the bond that formed between Shaq and Kobe during those Lakers championship years. Shaq has been telling one particular story for over 20 years because even now he can barely believe it happened. Game 4 of the 2000 NBA Finals against the Indiana Pacers. Overtime, Shaq fouled out and suddenly the Lakers were exposed. The entire championship was vulnerable in a single moment, and a 21-year-old Kobe Bryant walked over to Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most physically dominant forces the sport has ever seen, put his hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, big fella, I got it." 21 years old, NBA Finals, overtime, and he meant every word. Then he went out and closed the game like the moment was made for him. No hesitation, no visible pressure, just execution. Shaq has never forgotten it because that single moment revealed exactly who Kobe Bryant was when everything was on the line. Pierce genuinely had great moments in his own career. Nobody's taking that away. But people always return to the same point when his legacy comes up. His championship ring in 2008 came as part of a trio alongside Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. Meanwhile, Kobe answered every question about his ability to lead without Shaq by winning back-to-back championships in 2009 and 2010 with Pau Gasol. He didn't just survive after the dynasty ended, he built a new one. And according to Shaq, he saw that level of greatness coming long before the rest of the world had any idea what they were looking at. Shaq still talks about a moment from when they first met inside the Forum. An 18-year-old Kobe Bryant looked him straight in the eye and told him he was going to be the Will Smith of the NBA. Not a star, not a good player, the crossover cultural icon of his generation. Then, in the same conversation, the same teenager told Shaq he was going to be better than Michael Jordan. 18 years old, and he meant both statements completely. From that day forward, Kobe chased that belief with everything he had. He practiced longer, worked harder, slept less, and refused to stop when anyone else would have. That obsession eventually had a name: the Mamba Mentality. And it's why so many players around the league respected him deeply, even when they genuinely dreaded going up against him. But here is the part of this story that carries the most weight. Kobe never got the chance to respond to any of this himself. Not to Pierce, not to anyone questioning his legacy, not to a single person who tried to minimize what he built over 20 years. On January 26, 2020, a helicopter went down in Calabasas, California. Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 other people lost their lives. The sports world stopped completely. Shaq found out through his son. His initial reaction was disbelief. He was convinced it was false information spreading online. Then he called someone he trusted from the sheriff's office. When the confirmation came back, he broke down. What makes the timeline even harder to sit with is what had happened just hours before the crash. The night before, LeBron James passed Kobe on the NBA's all-time scoring list. Kobe responded publicly with a message of genuine congratulations and encouragement, full of warmth and respect for what LeBron had accomplished. Then, within hours, he was gone. That weight still follows Shaq visibly whenever he talks about Kobe, because he doesn't speak about him the way you'd speak about a former teammate or even a rival. He calls him his brother. And the thing that haunts him most isn't the tension they had over the years or the public disagreements that played out in front of the world. It's simpler and more painful than any of that. He never sent the text. After everything they went through together, after their last public sit-down that the entire basketball world had been waiting for, Shaq never followed up afterwards, never reached out afterwards, and Kobe never did either. Two brothers who went through everything together, and neither one made that final simple move to check in. Shaq has said openly that he would trade every championship ring he earned just to have sent Kobe one last message before that flight. That is how deep the loss still cuts. And that is exactly why people reacted the way they did when Pierce's comments surfaced. Because it wasn't just a sports debate to them.